Development of the brain remains a huge unanswered question in developmental biology. You can imagine the brain as a city. In order to build a city, you always need some sort of initial plan, and that's a little bit like what DNA does. DNA encodes the information necessary for the infrastructure or blueprint of the brain. This is necessary to set up all the different regions of the brain, much like a city has different areas. Genes in this case act as instructions, providing different identities to different brain regions. This is what we call brain patterning. In our city analogy, plans are made before the development of the city in order to separate different areas into different, let's say, functions in the city, such as the city centre and train stations. Under the control of the initial plan, different parts of the city gradually become more complex. This is largely a consequence of acquiring cues from the surroundings at the right time. An example might be an increase in the number of buildings, or the type of buildings, or the need for support services in the city. Eventually there is a need to connect different parts of the city, and this is largely achieved by the building of roads, bridges and rail tracks.
The number of buildings represents the number of neurons that are multiplying throughout development, and the different types of buildings represent the different types of cells that arise in our brain that have different specific functions. Now, the services can refer to other different cell types, such as the glia, which acts in a protective and nourishing role. And of course, as all this comes together throughout development, the roads and the bridges represent the connections between the neurons that eventually give rise to a more broader sense of connections between different brain regions that need to interact with each other. And this is what we tend to call the circuitry of the brain. These connections are mainly formed by two parts: an axon, which in our city analogy you can imagine as the start of a road in a specific building block in our city, and a dendrite, which acts as the terminal final point destination. The shape and the growth of these connections, the axons, is really fascinating, because they have to travel incredibly big distances in order to reach their targets. And how this happens and by what this is guided is also interesting as well. These connections, the axons, get external environmental cues and translate them to a pathfinding decision. Just think, if a road starts to be built from one part of the city, environmental signals such as a lake or a river are the ones that play the important role in driving the road growth to the planned direction in the right way so that it eventually reaches its target. This is not an easy task to do, but it is what is needed in order for the different brain regions to connect with each other, to perceive information, and to respond accordingly by carrying out behaviors.